So thanks for joining, everybody. I'm Catherine at NRG, and we set up this group around a year and a half ago now. Basically, it was more so to, we just really wanted to highlight, D&I as a subject, and just to share experiences and hear how others, have transitioned through their own journey as well. Some are much more experienced than others with things. So we've had lots of different guest speakers, but it's been 7 months since our last one, so quite some time. So it'd be good to get this going again. Sorry, as I keep pausing, it's because I'm admitting people. 2 seconds. That's great. Good. So just ignore me if I keep going off every now and then. So yeah, it's all about sharing, practice. We're not all experts, but we're all here to learn from each other. So we have the lovely Julie Wilson joining us as our guest speaker today. And I'll obviously let her, introduce herself and, talk about, share her experience with you guys. So are you happy to go, Julie?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you, Catherine. So just before I start, thanks very much for inviting me to do this, because I'm absolutely terrified, and it's not the type of thing I do very often. But it's nice to be able to come and, connect with people and just share a little bit about the type of work that I've been doing as well. So I'm Julie Wilson. I currently work for Northumbria University, but I just joined them in the last month. So I started at the beginning of May. I've worked in EDI and HR roles in universities for over 20 years now. But it's not the only thing I've done. I was a professional singer for 16 years. I've had my own cafe and catering business. So I've worked in a few different sectors. Worked in fleet management years ago. The list goes on. I was even a cartoon character, getting dressed up, walking around Metroland back in the early 90s. So I've worked in a lot of different settings. So I haven't always been sort of in higher education where allegedly we do everything right. But anyway, my name is Julie, as you will see on the screen, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a married mum of 2. I've got 2 sons. One of them's grown up and he has his own business now, and the other one's just going through his GCSEs. So that's a little bit about me. So anyway, I think it's probably sensible just to start from the beginning, because I don't know if everybody here is from an EDI background or how much you know about it, but just the very basics around equality, equity, diversity and inclusion. So obviously equality is treating everyone equally and ensuring that everyone has equal access to opportunities. So it doesn't matter what your background is or your circumstances, you shouldn't have any barriers in that way. So it's making sure that everyone has equal access to things. Diversity is recognising, including and valuing and taking account of different backgrounds, knowledges and skills and experiences, and understanding the benefits that these can bring to your business and also to your life. Inclusion is making sure everyone is made to feel welcome and supported and valued and fully able to participate. And I think that this is quite important in the northeast of England, because while we aren't really very diverse as an area in the UK, we can still be inclusive in our organisations. So we need to have everything right and all the principles and the values and the culture right, so that when people do come into our workplaces, even if they are in a minority group, they still, feel welcome and they don't feel, uncomfortable and out of place. So I'm sure everybody on this call will have seen this type of slide at one time or another, and it's the difference between equality and equity. And this is just understanding that people have different characteristics, they have different starting points. And if we need to level the playing field and get everybody to the same point, sometimes people need different things to one another. So that's the brief talk on EDI and all that kind of stuff. So why do we bother about this? Why bother? If we've got a business that's doing all right and we don't really have to think about it, why should we bother? Well, I mean, the full, everything's there, all of the different reasons why we would do this. But for me, the moral and social justice case is the big thing. We should be doing it because it's the right thing to do. If you want to take it back to our obligations, you've got the Equality Act and the law, everything around the 9 protected characteristics. And there are things where you can land yourself in hot water if you don't do the things you're supposed to do. But when you're talking to businesses, it's also worth pointing out that you've got economic success tied up there. And all the research shows that diverse organisations do better financially. You also have better results in performance because of that. You have a market case for it. So, for example, I'm a white, ginger-skinned woman from the northeast of England. I can't imagine any black British woman coming to me for hair extension products. But if anybody wants to talk to me about false tan and how I dye myself orange so I look more attractive to myself on a weekend, I'm your girl. So it's just thinking about, who are these people? Who do you see that mirrors you in the organisation? Who do you represent to them? And do you understand your customers and where they're coming from? Now, in higher education, we've got different drivers. So I would go back 20 years, say 15, 20 years ago, we used to do something that's now known as the REF, which is the Research Excellence Framework. And it used to be the REE when I first did it in 2008, and that was the research assessment exercise. And at that point in time, we were just looking at, the quality of research that was happening in our organisations. And it's tied back to funding that you receive from the government. So your research profile and how successful and the quality of your research as an organisation contributed to the type of funding you were able to access. And this has changed in recent years. And obviously, there's now a lot more around it. We look at impact cases. We look at the diversity of the pool of people who are being put forward for REF. So that it's not just about, well, here are a handful of our best publishers, our best researchers and writers. It's like, what does the diversity of that pool look like? So all of that's taken into consideration. We also have things like Athena Swan charter marks. So that's all around gender equality in higher education. And we have the race equality charter. But then between that, you've got your other characteristics that cut across. So I'm going to do a shameless plug here now. I'm absolutely delighted to be working for Northumbria because my role's been brought in specifically to look at the LGBTQ and disability agendas. So we're looking at like Stonewall. So we're looking at Stonewall Workplace Equality Index, and we're also looking to becoming a disability level 3 employer, which is like a disability confident leader status. So as well as having you have your drivers that you need to get your funding and grant applications, and you have to show diversity in your pool of academics who are applying for funding and securing funding. There are also other characteristics that we're now really starting to look at a lot more closely. So moving on. Just a little bit about protected characteristics. So obviously we have the 9 protected characteristics in the Equality Act, which are age, disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnership, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion and belief, sex and sexual orientation. So these are all of the things that are actually covered off in the Equality Act, and they are protected, and we need to be doing our best around those at all times. So thinking about how you apply things in the workplace. So when I was asked to do this, I was thinking about, right, what's most useful for me? So I've been to a few different presentations, and people talk about like the high level sort of like ethics around equality and diversity and things we should be thinking about. And I used to come away from a lot of these talks with like less of the practical things that we need to do and how you break it down. So I would say first and foremost, you need to look at, what your organisation is. Who are we? So you need to make sure that your culture is right. You have good values. You're diverse if you can be, or you're as diverse as you can be in this area. You have an inclusive organisation with inclusive policies and procedures. You have good role models. You demand the best of behaviours out of people. And you have ways of working that are accessible to everybody. So no barriers in the ways that you structure your sort of working arrangements, your policies, anything around flexible work and different things. And then also think about what your employer brand is, because I think everybody is experiencing a real skills gap at the moment. So whereas it used to be fairly easy to recruit to roles, one of my previous roles, I was recruitment manager at Durham University for 3.5 years. And we had to really fight to get good candidates, because it's not one of these markets now where you can just put a passive advert out and people are going to line up at the door to come and work for you. There just isn't that kind of thing happening anymore. So we need to be ensuring that we have a good employer brand and we're sending the right messages about the organisation. So, and then obviously once you've got your culture right within an organisation, you've decided who you are, who you want to be, all of the things that you should be doing, then you need to look at where you're applying these at the life cycle. So it's all around your attraction and recruitment, what we do there, onboarding, getting people in and setting the scene and making sure they're well equipped to do the jobs that they've been hired to do. Then thinking about development and progression and how you actually, progress people through your organisation. And if you have any dropping off points where you seem to have, less women or less people from other characteristics in your leadership roles, you need to have a good look at your data and be thinking why that is and see what you can do to sort of just level the field up a little bit. And then when people leave the organisation as well, I think that's sometimes a trick that we miss. Now, we do exit interviews, but people don't always, take us up on them. And sometimes if people are leaving an organisation, if they're happy, they tend not to have anything to say about it. If they're not so happy, maybe they don't want to cause a scene before they leave. But I think just exit information anyway around data and how we capture it's really important, because it can tell you a story around, you might be doing well at attracting people into your organisation, but what's it like for them once they actually get there, and what are the reasons for them leaving? So I'm then thinking about, right, do's and don'ts in the organisation. Long hours culture, it's a barrier to people. Anybody who has a disability or has caring responsibilities, a lot of different reasons why long hours culture just isn't good for people. And if you have a long hours culture where it really is just survival of the fittest, you're sort of cutting out a whole demographic of people who could do a really good job for your organisation, but aren't able to because of the environment that you're creating. Inflexible working arrangements, I'm sure, COVID's had its good and bad points. Some people have been really, really badly affected by COVID. A lot of people have had really positive experiences of the changes of the way that we've worked with COVID, and it's allowed greater flexibility around caring responsibilities, around health problems, just, different ways of working, and those flexible working arrangements are really, really important. And if you're trying to sell your place to people, in a competitive market, flexible working is one of the big sellers at the moment. Exclusionary practices. Now, this can be everything from saying, right, well, we're going to have our team meeting at 8 o'clock on a Friday morning, or we're going to do it at 5 o'clock on a Friday evening, and we're all going to go to the pub. What about people who don't drink alcohol, people who have to get off home to get the kids, all these different kinds of things. And then you have to look at barriers to progression. So, once again, if it's, that only your senior leadership are going to be getting to those levels because they've put a 70-hour working week in for the last 5 years of their life, how many people are set up in their family where they have the support that they can do that? Unfortunately, it's generally men who are in a position where the woman takes the primary carer responsibility. And I would say even when that doesn't happen, we have a culture where we don't really support, shared parenting. At the moment, shared parental leave is quite a recent thing, and, we need to be a bit better about promoting that. Lack of transparency, the lack of transparency in how your promotions criteria is run, how you develop people, why you would give people access to certain training and opportunities than other. There can be a tolerance of poor behaviours because that's just, it's just language, it's just a bit of banter, but it can have a really profound impact on people. Tokenistic actions, it's no good getting a badge and waving a piece of paper around and going, oh, look, we're an inclusive employer, when on the ground, the reality is very different for people in your organisation. So if you're going to go for accreditations and awards and charter marks, you need to really, really make sure that it truly reflects what's going on in your organisation, because that's when your staff are going to disengage and your culture's just going to plummet, because people will say, well, they've got this, that and the other. This is for the organisation. It's not for us. We aren't benefiting from this. It's not like that at all when you come to work, And then talk, not walk sounds a bit twee, but, people talk a good story. You'll get leadership teams who will say, oh, yes, we're a very inclusive organisation. We support this, we support that. Oh, but we don't want to change how we do anything because we've always done it that way, So it's like, yeah, well, we would like to be like that, but, in certain areas we know it's not like that, but it's always been that way. So why should we bother? Yeah. And once again, survival of the fittest. Do you have to really, really be like Top Gun to get to where you're going? You know, there's a lot of people who've got a lot to contribute. If we said that everybody who had a disability didn't have a place in the workplace, would have a massive benefits bill, would have a whole societal impact to that. There's people who can bring great things to the organisation, and they bring different perspectives that just don't need flogging, doing a 60-hour week in the office, up a flight of stairs, in amongst a whole load of people who are picking on them all the time. So simple things. So when you set your organisation up, you need to be thinking inclusive, respectful culture. You need to value your people and genuinely value them. Do a quality impact assessment. Sometimes you think, oh, we're just going to do this, and you think it's not really going to bother anyone. It's not going to have an adverse impact. You start looking at your staff data and the demographics of, you know, the groups of people that your actions are impacting on. You sometimes get a very different story, even if it's done with the best of intentions. So a quality impact assessment is really important when you're doing changes to the organisation, restructures, bringing in new policies. Equal pay, we should be monitoring equal pay. We shouldn't have a gender pay gap. I think there's a bit of a difference there. If you have got an equal pay issue where you've got one person being paid more than another person for doing the same job, that's a problem. If you have a gender pay gap within your organisation because you may just have a lot of women in, you know, lower paid administrative roles and a higher proportion of people in management and professional roles, you need to address that, but you don't address it by upping everybody's wages. What you do is you look at things and say, why are the people in the lower paid roles in our organisation predominantly women or predominantly of a different group? And it's thinking about, you know, being really proactive around what you can do about that as well. So staff networks, I think, are a brilliant thing. Staff networks can be a real level of support, and they can also be a great voice to the organisation where, you know, you've got those established, formalised routes to get that employee voice up to senior management. So staff networks are brilliant. At Northumbria, our LGBT staff network has just become finalist for Network of the Year at the Queer Student Awards, and it's great, but they do loads. They just never stop. They've always got different things going on. They really engage with the organisation, and they're not kicking the organisation all the time. They work with them, you know, and it's a partnership, and there's loads of positives going on there. So it's a really, really good network. Staff surveys are important. You can look at your data on your stats, but it's getting that qualitative information as well. But then you have to be wary of how you interpret that, because we did something in a previous organisation where we were looking at data for the Race Equality Charter, and we'd had a comment from someone from a minority ethnic background. Was like, well, I've never had an appraisal since I got here, you know, and we were like, oh, they've never had an appraisal. It's because, you know, they're from a minority ethnic group. Well, actually, our academic staff don't get appraisals. They're going to win a promotion round. So it was a lack of understanding on their part. But then that uncovers the fact that we need to ensure that everybody knows what the processes are and that it's transparent within the organisation. Engagement and employee voice are really important. So it's like understanding, because once you're in a leadership role, it's sometimes quite difficult to connect with people, like on the, you know, on the factory floor, on the shop floor, because people are scared to say sometimes what it's like. They don't want to be seen to be whinging, and, you know, there's some great stuff goes on that sometimes you don't hear about either, because you just don't have those day-to-day conversations. Accreditations and charter marks are really, really good at driving change, because it gives you a framework to work to. So they're worth considering if they are something that you don't already do within your organisations. And I touched on this just a little bit earlier, encouraging shared parental leave. So, you know, it's not so much thinking, oh, well, we're going to encourage all the dads to go and take time off. What about all the women in your organisation who would probably be more able to stay in work and do a shared parental arrangement when they go on maternity, paternity leave, because it was just generally more acceptable? You know, I mean, I think we're still at a point where we shouldn't say it, but where it's like, oh, what does he want to go on paternity leave for? Is he soft? And like, oh, she can't be a proper mum if she doesn't want to stay off with a baby. And it's just breaking those biases, you know, and making it the norm. You know, people used to smoke in the office 25 years ago. You don't say that now, but it was completely normal then. Who would have thought that now would be a complete no-no, you know? Yeah. Family friendly policies, as I say, all of your family friendly stuff, visible role models, you know, have people who are like role modeling good behaviours from the top. Have your CEO taking paternity leave, you know, doing some good things that they would expect people within the rest of the organisation to do. Celebrate your successes, do targeted development programs where you actually identify that there's a gap and you need to do a little bit more. Really take advantage of flexible and hybrid working and the types of employees that's going to bring you, and enable people to be good in the workplace. Don't disable them, because with disability, people who have a disability will often say that they're not disabled until they encounter the problems. So they might have a condition, but that isn't the disability. The disability comes from the environment that they're trying to exist in and perform in. So recruitment, breaking it down into the steps. Talent pipeline. Do you look at schools and colleges and universities and communities and organisations when you're thinking about how your talent pipeline for your organisation? Do you have skills gaps? It might be that you don't have a skills gap. Certainly for us in universities, if we're thinking about, how we engage with students from low participation areas, should we be doing that when we're doing careers and outreach for apprenticeships and bringing people into the organisation? So we're engaging with people from those areas too. Engaging with things like used to be the Asian Apprentices Awards. That's now the BAME Apprenticeship Awards. But, do you engage with that as an organisation to see if you can have a bit more visibility with that community? Thinking about your role design, your working hours, terms and conditions, role requirements and policies. Have all of your EDI aspects been, considered in that? Have you done equality impact assessments to see what the difference would be? Your employer brand, reputation. When they come to your organisation, is someone going to swipe left or right? We've heard all the bad stories about Amazon. They're doing a lot of work to try and, write the negative publicity that they've had. But, people have certain preconceptions around organisations. I hope there's nobody on from Amazon on this call. I'm not going to get shot. But, it's just one of these that straight away comes to mind. It's like, oh, don't be a delivery driver for them. You have to wait in a bush outside of Mrs. Thompson's at number 9. Do you know what I mean? It's like those things kind of stick and they stick in your mind. It stuck in my mind. I saw an HR manager's job for Amazon last year and I was thinking, sounds like it would be a lot of trouble to work there. But, it's just perception. Durham University, we've had our share of, negative press over the years. I think every organisation that's in the public domain does have that. And sometimes it's right and sometimes it's not right, and sometimes it's a complete misconception, but it tends to stick around. Advertising and search. So go beyond your normal channels, actively engage with people like NRJ, Catherine Hingston, very good at her job, by the way, can I just say?
Thank you.
But I mean, think about, how they work, more and more, there's like an emphasis on diversity. I've worked with headhunters for senior leadership roles, and we would demand diversity in the pool, the candidate pool. And if we didn't get it, we would go back and say, no, you need to do better for us. Do this, and just don't take no for an answer, because the people are out there. It's just like, right, how do we get them to engage with us? Think about your role descriptions, awareness of gendered language, the criteria, the requirements of the role. Must be able to lift 40 stone on the shoulder. Really? Must have a driving license. All of these things, your criteria. It's just, there's a lot of things that can be off-putting there, and there's loads of learning that you can do about it. Your flexible and family-friendly policies, shout about them, because they're a really big thing. And if you're doing great things, you should be proud about it. And they're the type of things that's going to bring applicants to your door. Think about your selection process, your ways of assessing capability, and what do you value as important. If you're thinking about engaging with people from minority ethnic groups, or where, their first language maybe isn't English, take that into consideration and look at the quality of the application, not the way it's presented. You may also have people who have things like dyslexia. There's going to be different things. So try and think carefully about what you're asking from your candidates to make sure that you get to, see how good they are. Selection panels, ensure diversity on your panels, goes without saying. Offers. Think about your gender on your offers and your ethnicity pay differences. So if we're looking at salary matching and men are generally paid more than women, you're just going to exacerbate that pay gap. So what can you do as an organisation to make sure that you're sort of leveling the gap? I know it's maybe going to cost you a little bit more money, but, is it the right thing to do? Should you get cheap labour just because you can? And I would be looking at declines as well. I used to take in a lot of data around, why people were declining. It's good to know that, and record data around your characteristics. I've had people who've come back to us and said, you need to feed your panel raw meat. I've had people who've said, I wouldn't come and work with those people. They were absolutely horrible when I did my presentation. And then we've had other people who've just said, I can't talk my husband into relocating You know, you get all different experiences and viewpoints, but it's good to have them because you do need to know. And if you stink, you need to do something about it. So onboarding, this is your opportunity to set the scene and define the culture. You should give people a comprehensive induction, good probation and supportive development plans, transparency around your progression and your criteria for development opportunities. Have mentoring and buddy systems. It's like you don't know what you don't know when you step into an organisation, and they're really, really valuable. Just setting people on the right course. I've been with organisations where I didn't really get an induction or a mentor, and I was finding things out 4 and 5 years later that had always been there. And so it's always useful. Mentoring and buddy systems, yeah, definitely a good thing to have. So staff networks and other support. Your staff networks are great for 101 reasons. And include EDI training as part of your required onboarding. So if you have mandatory training around health, safety, fire, whatever, EDI training should be in there as well, because not everybody's an EDI specialist, but everybody could do with just learning a little bit more about it and get feedback. So get feedback from the onboarding, find out what was missing, if there's anything that you could do better, and just use it to improve. Development and progression. Collect and use your data, identify inequalities. So I would be wanting to have a look at, you know, if you've got people from a minority ethnic background, are they spending proportionately longer at a grade or a level in the organisation than like a male white counterpart? Is there, you know, is there anything where women aren't progressing at the rate that you would expect? Look at your intersectionalities. So within higher education, we do gender pay gap reporting, but there's also ethnicity pay gap reporting. And then you start looking at, you know, if you start to look at, say, you know, a woman of colour within higher education, you see there's some quite worrying statistics can be identified in a lot of cases. So really look at your intersectionalities, because that's where you get a true picture. Averages tell you so much, but it's drilling down to that, like, you know, really detailed information that tells you more about what's going on a personal level for the individual. Leadership team diversity. What can you do to improve it? Are you diverse? You might be diverse. If you're not, what can you do about it? And do your pay gap monitoring and equal pay. You need to have fair development opportunities, consistent application of appraisals, coaching and mentoring, do role shadowing experiences, and succession planning. Look at your leaderships and identify your diversity requirements. So if you know that you haven't got any female people in leadership positions, have a look and think, well, why is that? Do you just not have the quality of the people in the organisation? It's maybe unlikely. If you're a large organisation, the people are going to be there. So why aren't they hanging around, or why aren't they getting through that glass ceiling? And do targeted development and interventions for underrepresented groups. So if you can identify that there is a gap there, you know, do some fast track development programs. Exit. So when people are on the way out of the door, I think it's always good to know why. People won't always engage with an exit interview, but I think even just by monitoring your data, it does tell you a lot. People's reasons for leaving, if you can find out, are they going on to a better job? You know, are you a hotbed for talent? Are people progressing and going on to better jobs elsewhere? Are they taking sideways moves? Are they taking a downward move because it's so miserable they just want to get out of the door? You just don't know, do you? And think about, you know, retention offers as well. Are you offering retention offers consistently? Or is it like, oh, well, do without her because she's got kids, you know? So there's a lot to consider there. And I think there's also, like, it sounds like I'm talking about a lot of negatives, but there's a lot of positives there as well. But I think that we do have to be aware that there are sometimes some systemic, you know, barriers to people progressing within the organisation and to them staying with us. So, you know, we need to identify them. And like, honestly, you do want to be holding a mirror up to yourself and thinking, right, if there's a problem, we should be addressing it, because it's the right thing to do. So the importance of data, it tells you the hidden story. It gives you the evidence to act upon. It busts myths, you know. It's needed for accreditations and charter marks. And it's also, you can use it to celebrate your successes and to address inequality. So sometimes people might go, oh, it's really crap here and it's this and it's that. And nobody gets a promotion if they're a woman, or if they're of, you know, LGBTQ, or if they've got a disability. Maybe your data's telling you something different. It might just be, you know, perceptions, in which case you need to think about how well you shout about the successes and how visible the success stories are. So there you go. Thank you for staying awake. Any questions? And there's my email address. If anybody wants to get in touch with me just to ask a question or to connect, I'm all for sort of cross-working across the region. I think there's a lot that we can do by working together, you know, critical mass and all that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Julie. That was really amazing.
I'm exhausted.
I bet you are. You'll be needing a throat lozenge after that. No, you did amazing. Some really, really interesting information, really thought-provoking. I'm sure everybody will agree. There's probably lots of areas that you covered there that other people, you know, maybe aren't aware of as well. And I really like the fact that you said take a look at yourself, because I think we should all take a look at ourselves and see, you know, where we could definitely do better in that way. So I think there was a question well, not a question as such, in chat. Was it from you, Richard? Can I
Yeah. Clearly, I'm happy to get involved and collaborate and coordinate with everyone on this call. I've just seen some fantastic best practice in this space, which I'm just super enthusiastic about, so I'll share with you. I mean, most of this is around the inclusivity. But, you know, the diversity, I'm sure if you haven't seen it, have a look at Matthew Syed's short video, Cognitive Diversity. It's on YouTube. It's about 3.5 minutes long. And it really is a powerful way of communicating this to senior stakeholders, because really, you know, having 10 people who think the same, you get the same answers, where if you get 10 people who come from different backgrounds and think differently, you get 100 ideas. And I think HR's been guilty of this. You know, before the pandemic, if you didn't have experience of HR in education, you wouldn't get a HR education job. Whereas now, HR people are in demand, so you can cross different sectors. And I think we bring tons and tons of great experience from different backgrounds. So that's my little pitch to Catherine to be open-minded.
Absolutely.
So my sort of 3 key points, and I don't know if there's anybody on the call from Arla before I speak. No, good. Arla are in a really interesting space on this subject. So, Julie, they don't have somebody dedicated on this space in the UK, but they do sort of globally in Denmark. So, where they started was their chief executive publicly spoke about his mental health challenges. And it was at a conference. Again, it's on YouTube, you can see it. And that kind of set the tone that people were open about, actually, it's okay to be not okay. So in Leeds, there's something called Andy's Man Club. And I think there's something in Teesside and Tyneside, which is similar, which is about getting blokes to talk about, you know, the challenges. And really that led to the second thing, which is somebody telling their story. So it was based around engagement, but it was all about inclusivity and valuing you know, people's stories. So there was a HGV driver who was struggling. He was actively struggling both with mental health and health. And because Arla's a food company, he effectively did a video diary of showing what he was eating before getting some professional help. Arla had a professional chef, so they worked with him on creating healthy options for he was a tanker driver collecting the milk. And he did video diaries, and they were, oh my goodness, they were just so powerful because he was being so vulnerable. And this was going out to all Arla employees who could view that. And it told the story better than any corporate policy or procedure. And it gave permission for people to openly talk about that. And the third thing they did, and I've just checked my LinkedIn feed and I've actually liked it, but because the UK had done such great work, it kind of pushed upwards. So sometimes when you've got global organizations, the UK does lead, and that's the case with this. And the person I was working for coined the phrase about dancing, and I guess you've heard that one before. So about being invited to the dance is one step. Second step is dancing at the dance, and the third step is dancing as if you don't care who's watching. And that's the journey that they're trying to do. And they've built a program around that. But I think it's just those small steps. And, you know, Julie, your presentation covers so much area, and being a specialist is great. And it's about trying to persuade people to buy into it. And personally, I found tagging it onto engagement kind of opened the door, and you know, we've done it before in other subjects, but getting a group of champions, ambassadors, whatever we call them, and bringing them together. And it doesn't take much. You know, this guy, this driver, he came forward. We didn't go looking for him. He came forward to us and said, I've got a problem and I'm happy to talk about it. So it's an exciting time to be in this space, because it's really, really important. And maybe it's because of it, recruitment, maybe it's because of remote working, but you know, we're opening up to new communities. It's not just the Northeast we're recruiting from. It's, you know, it can be wider. So that's my perspective.
No, that was really interesting. Thanks, Richard. Really interesting. I think we've got. Sorry, go on, Julie.
Sorry, just an answer to Richard. I think, you know, the thing about disability and mental health, people are really scared to show weakness at work because they think it's going to damage their prospect. Yeah. I think people are going to view them. People are embarrassed about it. And one of the things that we really do have is a problem with people disclosing disability. And if you don't truly know who's in your organisation, how can you make the organisation fit for them? You know, and like with us being in higher education, we have students who come in, they're a paying customer to the university, they're paying for a service. If they have a requirement, they're going to get straight in touch with student support and say, I need X, Y, and Z to come in and for me to complete my studies successfully. And we're all geared up for that. And then that same student could end up being a member of staff, and we don't have the same support and we don't have the same processes in place on the staff side of things. So why should it stop for them then? They're still in the same organisation and they're still in the same environment, but they're in a different role. So therefore they don't get the same support. So, you know, and people are scared. It's like, if they're a paying customer, they'll ask for the help and they'll ask for the adjustments and expect it. But then if they're a staff member, they're scared to because they feel like they're, you know, being a burden or just being awkward. And we need to really just change that mindset.
Exactly. You've just triggered a thought in my mind. Interviewing somebody remotely, everything went fine, absolutely, you know, and then they turn up for work and they're not what you were expecting. And they might have a disability that you were completely unaware of, but you've got to react to that and you've got to handle that. So, yeah, I think I agree with everything, Julie. I think you've got a really interesting job and happy to collaborate
definitely
afterwards.
Yeah. Mark?
Oh, yeah, great presentation. Thank you. I've learned a lot. I was just going to say, if you bang the drum for neurodiversity when you talk about disability, is it a disability? Is it not? That's another question, but we haven't got 4 hours to discuss that. If you change a lot of things for the neurodiverse, you'll actually help everybody. Like I've been in an organisation that's got white desks, white walls, and I think, well, that's overpowering for everybody. And then if you just change, like, I know you were saying, was it an interview or presentation? Well, got to throw them red meat. I'm like, if you've got a row of people and you're sat in front of somebody, you're like, oh, I'm on edge. But if you've just got a conversation, it just helps everybody, doesn't it?
When I'm interviewing people, I want to see them at their very best. I want to see them comfortable, so they're like relaxed, because you know what it's like when you have all that affirmation bias and all that kind of stuff we'll go into. But when it comes down to it, if you've got someone who's coming for an interview for you, you genuinely want the best person in the job, don't you? So you want to see that person at the best, not when they're under pressure.
It's not the best person, it's the right person.
The right person. But you want the best person who's going to be the best fit, the right person to come into your organisation. You don't want people on the back foot and make them feel uncomfortable so they're uptight. When are you going to see the natural? When are you going to see the real person with that going on?
A lot of people across the disability spectrum as well. Well, with ADHD and autism, we kind of underplay without realising, and we're underplaying our conditions. But across the disability spectrum, we've always had these conditions. You might have been in a wheelchair from a very young age. So you've not got to get used to anything, but you're always overcoming problems. And when you say, do you need any help or assistance? No, I'm all right, because I've always done that. Where actually, yes, you do. And if you've not started that job yet, you don't know what adjustments you need. You know roughly what the job's about, and you know you're going to be at a desk or you're driving or whatever. But you don't always know yet what adjustments you need. So
of course not. No.
I think with that's definitely a topic that we're looking to cover in the next or the one after Mark, neurodiversity. So, you know, we can have a separate conversation on that. And,
Yeah.
you know, maybe, but I know John's keen to speak as well. And yeah.
So thank you, Julie, for a great presentation.
Thank you.
When it comes to disability, so I've got an invisible disability. I've got a brain injury.
Right.
And I found that quite often the recruitment process has been quite difficult, because this is how I've ended up starting my own business. It's like, where and how do you disclose the disability? Is quite a tricky one, and there's lots of different ways of doing that. That's why I've devised a disability disclosure letter, where I can actually explain what my disability is and what my adaptations are, and I can give that over to an interviewer at the start of an interview, and it gives the power back to the interviewer. They understand it's just very brief what everything is, and what that means is now being interviewed, gets back to what you've just said. I can interview with just me. I can plan and strategize, but at the end of the meeting, I might need an email to tell me because I've forgotten it, because I've got memory issues. I'm not going to say that in an interview. It's hard. So I'm trying to work on 2 levels at an interview. By using this letter, it takes that pressure off me, and I can just interview as me. And that's so much easier for me as just an interviewee. And it's also, I think it's a lot easier for the person doing the interview, because then they've got the power to see how I fit into the whole organization and stuff like that. So I think sometimes the recruitment process can aid people with disabilities as well, by having something like that in the process somewhere along the way. So that it makes it more inclusive, where it gets the disability, it gets all that just dealt with from the get-go, and then we don't have to start worrying about what needs to be done on the way.
And some people are scared to declare a disability at application stage. I mean, we would always say, do you have a disability? Do you have any like reasonable adjustments? Do we need to do anything for you to come to interview? You know, but then if you can gear up your selection process so it's kind of there anyway, it sort of reminds me of a thing. I was talking to one of our, it's the Director for Accessibility and Inclusion on student side of things at Northumbria. And I've just had a meeting with him last week, and we're talking about accessible teaching. So normally if you've got, you know, lecturers will tend to go, right, well, this is how I deliver my lectures, this is how I teach this module. If you are having problems because you have a disability, go to that department over there and they'll help you with, like, you know, stuff so that you can do my lectures. But really, we should be teaching people who are lecturing to maybe, you know, teach and deliver their learning in a way that is accessible to more people. You know, and there'll always be some things where you're going to need an adjustment, but like, you know, thinking about, I mean, a conversation with yourself would be great to find out, you know, what your personal experiences are where you come to interview, so that I would know that to be able to work with our recruitment team and say, oh, well, if you ever, have you thought about doing this or that, you know?
Yeah, happy
We don't
to have
know,
those
we
conversations.
don't know what we don't know, but I would love to talk to you about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. Anybody else have anything? I think we're coming quite near the end, so I'm sure everyone always is going to have questions around so many different things. But yeah, keen to get these up and running again. Hopefully monthly. There's a lot goes into it, so we'll hopefully have one in July, but it may be August, in all honesty. But I'll let you know what the next topic is going to be. And Julie, thank you so much. It's been really, really great to have you.
Thanks for having me. And like I say, if anybody needs anything from me, just drop us an email or get in touch in LinkedIn.
Great. Thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.